Hi everyone. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Charley Genever. I'm community producer for Peterborough Presents. And if you don't know who Peterborough Presents are, we're the Creative People and Places programme funded by Arts Council England for Peterborough. Um, and I'm really excited to be hosting this talk alongside Mark Murphy and Simon Martin, and I'll get them both to introduce themselves in a second. And today really is about us deep diving and sharing our learning, taking you through the journey of the project that became Millfield of Dreams, which we're all really proud of. And yeah, generally, this is our first time hosting an online talk like this. So I'd really appreciate your feedback if you want to send that or share it at the end. That would be wicked because I think we'd quite like to do some more public facing stuff like this. And feel free to use the chat throughout to ask questions. We've got a designated Q&A bit at the end of the talk, but feel free to chuck them in as they pop into your head and we'll get to them at the end. If you've got anything burning, feel free to just unmute yourself and ask. Like, I'm really up for this being interactive and a conversation. Um, yeah, I think that's pretty much it for just general housekeeping stuff. Mark, would you like to introduce yourself?
Would. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming along. I'm Mark Murphy, and I was the uh, director, editor, and I suppose I conceived the original concept and idea for the film and for the whole project alongside Peterborough team and my team.
Amazing. And Simon?
Yeah, I'm Simon Martin. I'm the head of the school that hosted Gladstone Primary, that hosted the filmmaking. Yeah, just more of a facilitator, really, I think, in this one, of just, giving the space and kind of supporting the project.
Admit. Thank you. And if you've joined a little bit late, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Um, oh, as I say that, someone else enters. There we go, admit. Cool. So I thought it would be useful before we dive into the project itself to just set the scene and give a little bit of context about the neighbourhood that we know as Millfield, to bring you on the journey with us, I guess. So it is a neighbourhood within Peterborough that is kind of anecdotally and locally and socially much bigger than what the ward is from a parish council or kind of political geographic nature. And that itself is really interesting in how people identify with the neighbourhood of Millfield. But it is one of the most diverse parts of the city. Over 100 languages are spoken. It's often people's first stop when they move here from all over the world. For those that move out of the area, they still have a strong connection, either culturally, socially, in a faith-based way. It's a place to worship, a place to shop. There's a road called Lincoln Road, which has restaurants, independent shops, and businesses that represent across the globe. It is also a place that has a history of being promised investment and financial investment, particularly that rarely materializes. And it is also a place that's targeted by racism, xenophobia, particularly on social media. And we, to give a little bit of context to how Peterborough Presents decides which neighbourhoods we work in, because we can't work everywhere, we're a tiny team as much as we'd love to. We use our audience data and then the national active live survey and census data to figure out of those areas in the city that don't get engaged in the arts. I say that in inverted commas because our learning so far really is that the idea of creativity, people are creative and do creative stuff all the time, but it's how that's recognized and how relevant the stuff that is currently on offer is. So Millfield was identified as one of the places that is low engaged in the arts. Mark or Simon, is there anything you'd add about Millfield as a place?
Yeah, I'll jump in there if you don't mind, Simon.
Yeah.
So, just to give a bit of background on myself, so I am originally from Peterborough. I was born there, and I spent, I think, approximately 4 years of my childhood living in Millfield and living in the heart of those communities. I always think that obviously Peterborough is landlocked, but if Peterborough was by the coast or by the sea, then Millfield would be the docks. And it is absolutely people's first port of call. And it has that energy and it has that friction as well of being that first staging place. I've got a really warm affiliation to the place because it's sort of in a childhood that wasn't exactly privileged. The communities of Millfield really sort of scooped my family up and took care of us when we most needed it. So it has a special place for me. And so when this project arrived or came across my desk, it just seemed like a ridiculously perfect combination of where I came from and what I was doing now. And I'm just a little sort of potted history, if you'd allow me. But so I grew up in Peterborough. I was from all kinds of different council estates in Peterborough. I went to a very good but large and rough old comprehensive school. But there was an art department that was just an oasis of brilliance and calm and creativity. And that set me on a road to, first of all, fine art. Then I was sort of kidnapped by the world of contemporary dance for about 10 years, where I became a sort of, I blush, but a very famous choreographer who went all over the world with making that work. Then I started getting into theatre and into writing and into making really big shows for global sporting ceremonies and European capital of culture, opening events to hundreds of thousands of people, and also into writing for TV and film and filmmaking. So I've migrated through a huge amount of different art forms to arrive at this point where I can sort of, the absolute sweet spot is making work like this, which is performative. There's film elements to it. There's, if you've seen the film, and I hope you have, then there's a definite choreography to the film in the way it's all knitted together. So without Peterborough and without Millfield, this, for me, this project wouldn't be possible. My career probably wouldn't be possible. I dread to think where I ended up if I hadn't found astonishingly creative outlets. Yeah.
Amazing, thank you. Simon, anything to add from the school's point of view?
Yeah, I think almost the opposite from you, Mark. I've come to Peterborough from outside of Peterborough, and then got to I think got to recognise that a school is a really important part of the community. And I think we're very privileged in schools. We get to see more of the community, the cultures, maybe a little bit more knowledge of what's going on behind those doors, behind those front doors. But I think for me, the schools reflect some of the challenges that you've mentioned, Charlie, in terms of deprivation, high amounts of EAL, high mobility. But, I think the schools are a little oasis, I think, really, of just, the vibrancy and, the good relationships that I think we can help promote across the community. Yeah, and we know that our families, you know, won't access the arts in a wider sense. Often, outside of school, it will be a case of we either need to bring the arts to them or take the children to the arts to have that experience, And I think, Charlie, we've worked through Peterborough Presents on a number of different things, and I think it's a really important part of that cultural education for our children and recognition of the communities that we have here.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. Yeah, and as Simon mentioned, we have been doing which is moves on to my next slide. The photos on the right are some examples of some of the other projects we've done in Millfield, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a potted history of how we ended up with the residency call out. So Mark was chosen by a community panel. So our decision making as Peterborough Presents, we as a staff team rarely make the decisions on what artists we're going to work with. Often that is our community panels made up of residents, organisations, and people that work or live in those neighbourhoods or in those demographics when we do demographic based stuff. And so Millfield, we started working in 2017. And we are, as a side note, we are going to be publishing a case study that looks at that long-term working in that neighbourhood overall. So if you're interested, drop me a little email at the end, and then when we decide how we're going to put that out in the world, I'll send it your way. Because there's so much learning in long-term and relationship building. But to give a real potted history, the main bulk of what we did from 2017 to 2024 was program a co-created festival called Millfield Festival on like an open field in the middle of the neighborhood. And that was brilliant in lots of ways in terms of getting to know all of the communities and developing relationships and building trust. And it springboarded some other projects related to that. But then in 2024, we decided to pause the festival and try a different approach and instead thought about leaning more in towards a residency model and having a resident artist to work on a project that allowed, I guess, a broader length of time for engagement. Was I guess our main rationale. So as I said, we had a community panel. Two of Simon's teachers, Xander and Zara, were on that community panel. We had community organisation from a community centre called the Iqbal Centre. We had residents that represented Indian communities, Pakistani communities, Eastern European communities. It was a real mix of residents and organisations. And we put a really open call out. I'm going to tell you what the aims were on the next slide, but we put this call out with those aims. Panel met, panel chose Mark, and then Millfield of Dreams ran from August 24 to May 25. The main engagement and planning was August to January. We had a filming week in February half term, and then the film launched in person online in May 2025. Seeing it in that potted history, it both like as this project as a whole, it feels like it was one of the longest projects we've ever done in a good way. But then also you realise actually how short comparatively it was, and we crammed a lot in. Um, so what the aims of the residency were to co-create something or a series of things with our many wonderful community partners and residents in the Millfield and Gladstone areas. And to get to what we wanted specifically and get the voices of the community in the aims of that residency, we hosted a dinner in February 2024. And at that dinner, people said they wanted something intergenerational that adults and kids could do together, perhaps with a focus on traditions and cultural heritage. Celebrating and or educating on people's cultural and ethnic identities, different communities and backgrounds coming together and feeling connected to each other to build a positive reputation of the neighbourhood and something that allows for drop-in or pop-up engagement for people who have busy lives. And I'd say Millfield, in comparatively with some of the other neighbourhoods we work, it is the place where people's capacity and time commitment isn't there compared to some of the other neighborhoods. People want to get involved and are keen, but they don't have the capacity or the time. So that was something that was quite crucial, I think, for how people could engage with whatever this project ended up being, that it would allow that equal kind of opportunity for people that only have an hour to give. So yeah, Mark, do you feel you've ticked those boxes with this project?
I think so. I think because it's not necessarily like you read these things and go, right, what can I do that ticks
Mm.
these boxes? And I think for all of us, it's sort of already in our bones that this is a method of working, this is a way of life from an artist's point of view, that you do these things when you're making stuff. So it's funny to read it again and go, oh, did I actually do all those things? But it sort of is, it's kind of how I and how all our partners, I think, make and deliver work.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Um, Amazing. Um, the next thing I thought I'd quickly touch on is when I go to these kinds of events, I'm always really keen to know what the nitty-gritty nuts and bolts of how many people were involved, and what the actual practical journey was. So I thought I'd touch a little bit on that. Um, because the scale of the film itself, you might think there were hundreds of people working on it, and there were in terms of participants and people that got involved, but the core delivery team was actually pretty small. So I was the lead producer, and I'm full time with Peterborough Presents. We also had an associate producer called Shazia, and she was on a part-time contract and was very much there as extra support from the producing side. Obviously, we had Mark, but then Mark also brought in Alex Palmer, who was director of photography, a drone pilot and editor, and Bridget McCarthy, who was assistant director. Um, yeah, so that was us, that was the team. And then some extra facts about the project itself. We had about a 35k budget. We had over 100 participants, both in the camera and then additional volunteers. We had about 15. We had 5 new partnerships. So far, we've had 7 screenings locally. And so far, we've got an audience digitally of 1,800 on the YouTube video, and then about an audience in person of about 9,000 so far. And yeah, we've got lots of pictures of the behind the scenes progress on the right. Is
Two
there
old
anything
men
you'd...
stare at a computer monitor at the bottom there.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah, when I say me and Shazia, absolutely, yeah. Sarah as the overall support, and then we have as rest of the team, we have Kim, who's part-time progress assistant, who got involved in tiny little bits because they were on adoption leave at this point. And then we had Keely Mills, who's our part-time community producer, who also stepped in with some of the filming week stuff. Um, over to you, Mark, for a little bit. We thought we'd
Yeah,
start with chatting about the planning and kind of the early engagement and how you got from being awarded to the commission through to filming week.
yeah. I think it's also worth saying that that level of crewing on the complicated film that it was is the lightest possible footprint you could imagine. Take any one of those people out, it wouldn't have happened, as simple as that. So we knew, because of the budget, because of the time constraints, we cut our cloth accordingly, which isn't a complaint in any way, shape or form. But everything was it made the planning and the previs and the pre-production absolutely crucial to the success of the film, because I knew there would essentially be 4 or 5, 6 of us in the room on the shoot days. So the way it always starts with me is obviously to come up with the idea, and that's a weird old time, because it's a vulnerable time, and there's a sort of dark little or dirty little secret that we all have about this, is that most of the ideas you come up with are rubbish. They're inappropriate. They're shockingly bad. They don't work. They're misguided, and then they're never going to happen. But there is no way to go around that. You have to suck it up and be courageous and bold, and just accept that most of the stuff that's going to come out of your mouth isn't going to be of great quality. But just trust your instinct from 30 odd years of making work, that's always the way. And at some point, something will start to just gnaw at you a little bit. And on receiving the commission, I think we all felt quite quickly that a film was the way to go, because of the constraints of the project. It felt like this is controllable, because I do lots of stuff that's much more performative and completely in the live arena, which we also considered as well. But it felt like, okay, let's put something on film, because that gives us some guidelines and guide rails. And then the idea of it being in a box, literally being in a box, felt like this gives us our parameters. This 16:9 aperture, the 16:9 room, is the thing that holds the event. It holds the show. It holds the film inside, and that became very important, because someone, G.K. Chesterton, said the most beautiful part of any picture is the frame, because that gives you your boundaries, that gives you your constraints, and I really believe that. So the thing I started to do early on was build slightly shonky models. I don't have them here today, but I do have a box of the person, and it always starts with something as simple as this. Know what your boundaries are, know where you can go and what you can't do, and sort of have a setup. And so we started building, and then I would make little previs films. And at that point, it became the sort of the bounce of communication between me and Charlie and the team, and also with the some of the initial participants and the groups. It's a bit of a mysterious old stage as well, because it's one of the amazing things about working with Peterborough Presents, with their courage in letting us as artists be artists. And part of that role of an artist is to not know what you're doing for quite a long part of the time, because that's where the really good stuff comes from. I think that's where stuff that doesn't necessarily give up its answers too quickly, that's where the gold lies for me. So there were quite a lot of conversations where, you know, we knew roughly which direction it was going, but I never felt any pressure to nail anything down too early, or in fact, until quite often on the day, things were still being worked out, which is exactly, in my mind, how it should be. So there was lots of me visiting, discussing, getting feedback, and just building a little schematic for it all. We knew we wanted a building. We thought initially about maybe projecting live onto the building, but then again, it all came down to, no, this is a standalone film that can be really strong because of that. The process is a weird tile puzzle. Once we had the idea, then we would start to think about who's going to be in it and the schedule for the shoot. And we knew we'd probably have 7 or 8 days maximum. I don't know, Charlie, if you want me to go into the actual shoot week at this point, or
I have got a slide on it in a little bit, so we could go in deeper. But if there's anything that, yeah, you want to start with, and then
yeah, if you want to add anything to that, Charlie, in terms of process from your
yeah. So I think we already had an event called Millfield Makers, which was a real small scaled down version of Millfield Festival, like a kind of a day of different workshop activities for people to make. So Mark came to that as the first, I guess, kind of public facing thing, to start chatting to the people that came, showing some really, really early drafts of like the screen grabs on the screen of those little model makeups. To just get some of that feedback and to chat through the process. And then from there, I looked after all the practical things that we needed to figure out around the set itself, where to host it, and that's where I started having conversations with Simon and his team. And what was like the absolute, it was such an easy sell, this project, for lots of people. And I think what made it a really easy sell for people to get involved is the length of time we've been working with people, so they already kind of trusted us. But this project also allowed lots of new people to get involved, and that was, I think, like Mark's connection to the city and track record meant we could go, look who we're working with, isn't he amazing, and he's from Peterborough. So like the initial excitement was there. So it made my job in lots of ways really easy to bring people in. Yeah, I think that's probably all I would say from that. Well, I'll touch on it a bit more at the end, but there were lots of teething problems in there to get to that filming week, around the practicals of building the set, finding the stuff to go in the set. But it was all fine in the end. And I'll touch on that a little bit more.
yeah, and also just before we move on,
Yeah.
the technical considerations as well of of filming it, knowing that we were going to be in Simon's fabulous school, but we would have enough room for one room, literally, that we would build in there. And that's, that was always the plan. That was what we budgeted for. So you essentially have your one room, but then working in consultation with my DP, Alex Palmer, who is lurking at the back of shop, working on another project as we speak. I don't know if you can see him there, but depending on where you put the camera, this is a bit technical, but if you put the camera down there, then that feels like that room is upstairs. If you put the camera up there, that feels like the room is downstairs. And if you put it over there, it's the left-hand room, and down there, it's the left-hand upstairs room. So there was a lot of technical toing and froing to get, again, so the very last thing you want to do is turn up for your shoot and go, okay, where do we do this? Where's the best place for the set? Where do we put the camera? Because then you've already wasted 4 hours minimum. So this very cost-effective way of simple models, months ahead of time, working out all that stuff, that can apply to anybody working in any art endeavor, is that no matter how simplistic or basic that might feel, all of those things are like your first rehearsal, and it can be a fantastic place to work out a whole host of problems that you then don't meet in much more pressurized time later.
Yeah, amazing. Cool. So, yeah, which, as I said, led on to having more in-depth conversations with Simon about the project and partnering with Gladstone Primary. So yeah, I've made some notes on here about, from our perspective, why they were such a crucial partner. So yeah, Simon, Zara, Xander, and then Lisa, one of the trustees, were so crucial in that, like I said, Zara and Xander were on the community panel, so shaped the brief itself, then were involved in the decision making. Then Simon was incredible at supporting the legality and the health and safety of us being able to use the school. And then also connecting to students, not just students currently at the school, but also former students, which led to us meeting two of the main stars, Thomas and Kerrier, who then were featured on the local news. There's a screen grab of them there being interviewed. Yeah, and they were proper little stars. But yeah, Simon, I thought I'd bring you in here, and if you want to talk from your point of view about this partnership.
Yeah, I said, I think, we see the school as being part of the community, so it was really important, that we were involved in part of the film. We had a space, and Charlie and Mark needed a space, and we kind of started from that point, really. And I think my role was just being a champion and being a bit of a facilitator of kind of promoting that within the school, promoting that within the trust, and helping overcome some of those kind of barriers maybe around people who didn't understand the depth of what we were trying to do and the rationale for what we were trying to do. I think through those discussions, it was great that Mark had that connection with the local area and was talking to Charlie and about, there was an open call for the two key children to kind of appear in the film, and I really strongly felt it needed to be from our local community. It was about the place, but it didn't, it needed some local children to really have that role. And Thomas and Kerry were children who've come through the school 3-4 years ago who were fully involved. Anything to do with performing arts that we did within school, they were 100% involved in it, but had never had the opportunity to take that beyond the school environment. And Thomas has quite an interesting story with his involvement with the local area, both positive and negative, and I think it's a real journey for him. But it was a real opportunity to kind of say, to reach out to them, through old emails and to parents and say, there's this going, are you aware of it? Can I introduce you to Charlie? And then really after that, after all I didn't do the risk assessments, but the trust were very supportive with that. And then basically we gave Charlie the keys for a week during half term. And it was great. I dropped in during the filming, and it was just lovely to see. It's a real old-fashioned primary school hall. It's doing dinner times at the moment, and assemblies and PE, school activities. It's been a dance studio in the past, but just amazing to come and see the space, and you see it in that final shot as it pulls back. recreated as a film studio. It just kind of shows the resource that we do have within communities. Back to you, Charlie.
Yeah, amazing. And I think and I'm very guilty of this as a producer and someone that works in the sector as well. I think sometimes with schools we just see schools as a place to run a workshop with students, but actually it can be a venue for so much more than that, and the relationship with schools can be so much deeper than that. And yeah, this was a core part of that. Amazing, thank you. Um, so then on to filming week itself. There's lots of photos here of the various bits, some shots of the stuff in Gladstone Primary, but then we also did some out and about filming, including temporarily shutting a road. So we had what Mark calls the hero facade, the film, the gable end at the beginning of the film, which we turned up one evening, had lots of volunteers in place. And actually, what was really nice about this project is that the police and the PCSOs were really supportive. They came and checked on us to make sure we were all right a couple of times while we were filming. And it was being out and about in public like that was also a really good marketing tool for the project itself, because there were lots of nosy people finding out what we were up to. And it was, yeah, just a really nice way to celebrate the area live while we're making the film, as well as then the film itself being a celebration of the area. Yeah, Mark, is there anything you'd add about the filming week itself?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as discussed earlier, there was over 100 cast members that side of the camera, and I think this was the real beauty of the format that we've sort of stumbled on, is that you can do no wrong as a performer in this film. There is nothing you cannot do or not do within reason, obviously. But if you want to come in for your half an hour or for your hour and sit inside that room and make a phone call and have a cup of tea, perfect, absolutely perfect. Because when later I'm editing that film together, we've got somebody having a cup of tea sitting on a bed, and in another room we've got somebody looking up in their direction. And as soon as you edit those two things together, you've got someone else who literally walked into the room and I said, okay, just look up to your right. And they just look up. And then when they're edited together, you've got a story. You've got someone connecting with someone who's on the phone having a cup of tea. And that can be like some sort of little whiff of romance, or there's a thriller element to it, or just a very sort of odd juxtaposition. So this format enables people to come in with highly prepared stuff. So our fantastic Lithuanian?
Yeah.
Yeah, Lithuanian dance group, who came in super prepared with their fantastic dances. You have that end of the spectrum where you shoot that lots of times, or the person who wants to come in and just sit there. And the beauty of that format is there is nothing people cannot, as I say, do that doesn't somehow, with really complex but skillful editing, then start to build that story. So that was a fantastic discovery, and the mechanics of the day were pretty crazy, because it was a relatively slow, and as you will all know, doing projects yourselves, but you have a relatively slow start to these things, and then as soon as word gets around, people are going, oh, can I do it? Can I do it? So by the end of the 8 days, we were cramming people in, and we were shooting 12, 14, 15-hour days anyway, because we'd often be getting up at 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning to drive out into the fens and shoot those landscapes as well, which I felt was very important. And then we'd grab some breakfast, and then we'd arrive at 9, and then our first group would turn up, and we would start to find what to do with them. The beauty of this for me, is that you have people turning up understandably nervous, slightly bewildered, and like, what do you expect me to do? And then an hour later, they're walking out as confident artists and performers, and that transition happens in a spectacularly beautiful way for me. So we would do that, and each setup we would change the room. So we would go from a bedroom to a dining room to a living room to a spare room or whatever it was. So we actually filmed some time lapse of, you do a very calm setup, and then you would film that for an hour or half an hour, and then suddenly your next group would be arriving, and we would dive into that room and then ransack it and completely redress it for the next group. So the days had this unusual and highly addictive rhythm to them by the end. Then in the evening, we would also go out and shoot, particularly in Lincoln Road, and get lots of incredible shots of that whole environment. And then we would finally arrive at home 9-10 o'clock in the evening, and then we would review all the rushes. So there were long days, but what it meant, by watching it all in the evening, you could go, oh, look at what they did. So tomorrow, when another group comes in, it would be fantastic if they listen to the floor at that point, or they rush out of that door because that person's just rushed into that door. So it's like this weird tile piece jigsaw that's constantly moving in my mind. But what I knew the whole week along was that we were getting really precious stuff. And it's the hardest thing to just come in and be yourself and be natural and not be camera shy and not suddenly sort of walk in a strange way. But we gave some people more direction than others. Some people wanted it, some people didn't. There's the really sort of sad scene with a guy on his own. We said, think of something maybe that's a little dark in your life, a little sad in your life, and he gave us this really moving performance, and we were a bit like, ooh, I hope we haven't pushed him too far. And then he said, no, I was actually thinking about getting the wrong sauce on my kebab or something, and my team losing at football. So he was a fabulous way of working. So it was, in brief, it was an exhilarating, exhausting, and thoroughly enriching week of filming with everybody. And I think you can arrive at a good piece of work in lots of ways, and you can sort of push people around a little bit and pressure people and sort of shout people, but it's just it's not my way at all. And I find that people want to express themselves, and if you can create, and this is down to the environment we were in and my team and the Peterborough Presents team, but if you can set up this environment where people feel both vulnerable but also able to express themselves, then you're really onto something. And I think that's what we all did together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just that I'd add, from our point of view and working with groups and who we could bring in, on the bottom left, we've got a photo of the Wickets Cricket Club. This was the first, I think, project where we've really easily been able to involve sports groups and non-arts clubs, because they were the cast and they could show that and create this collaboration between sport and art in a way that can be a bit harder with other projects that are more participatory or hands-on in the making side of stuff. They were the stars, and again created some of my favorite moments in the film, of that element of comedy of the next gen football lots having a football match the whole way through the house, and then the Wickets girls losing the ball. It was a really nice way for us to bring in other groups and partners to the table. Yeah. So then Mark and the team went away, like you said, edited that jigsaw all together beautifully. And then fast forward to
Sorry, Charlie.
May. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, just to cover the editing side of it, because I can't remember how many hours, but there was a lot of footage that we shot, and I knew that was always in the back of my head that this was going to become the edit of all edits. and I think we thought we might be 2 or 3 weeks, but in the end, I think I did 74 days of editing to arrive at that thing, and that's not a complaint either at all. That was just wanting to do justice to the thing, and also working with a brand new edit suite as well that could accommodate all of that footage and be able to splice it together. And that was another time when Peterborough Presents let the artists be the artists. So there was, again, we have fantastic communication, but there was never any pressure to, I need to see a first cut or anything like that. It was just stuff would come through when it was ready, but it needed that time to settle down, to know, to really get our heads around what that format was.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazing. And yeah, equally, like I think from our point of view, to have artists that are so committed to the quality of the end product and to push for that, as much as we do pay artists where properly. Yeah, the commitment from Mark and the team to create that thing of quality was, yeah, absolutely incredible. And so that led us to thinking about, as Mark said, in the original idea, we'd have loved to project it somewhere in the neighborhood on the side of a building and host it as a live event. For budget reasons, for practically, for time, for finding the right building, we decided instead to do a more kind of classic film launch, but we wanted it to be something that felt super special. And thankfully, the Odeon in Peterborough, which was a pretty new cinema, I think it had only been open a few months, when I reached out to them, were incredible hosts. They gave us 3 screenings in kind, and set out the red carpet and gave us our own little VIP area. And yeah, so we launched the film in May on the big screen. And a little learning point for me, I didn't realize IMAX is filmed so differently to more kind of traditional or standard films, because originally I was like, let's do the IMAX, let's go for the massive screen. But we didn't, we just used the standard screens. And they were really brilliant at giving us like a tech run to test out the tech ahead of time. And yeah, like I say, providing this really exciting environment for people to come and feel special and bring their friends and family. And we had some other kind of more local authority VIPs and things like that. Yeah, it had such a brilliant feel to the evening.
It was the cherry on the cake to the project, wasn't it? And it was a real thrill for us as well. And speaking on behalf of as director of photography Alex as well, to see our work and see all that work we put into the edit, see it on a theatrical size screen was a thrill for us. So for the cast to come along and have that special night as well was yeah, it was the perfect end to the project. And it was really weird. There was one because I'd spent so long looking at these people on screen, then so I thought if there was something in my brain that said I'd walked into a 3D version on the night because I was suddenly seeing them all for real again. It was a really freaky sensation for a little bit. I was almost like, whoa, what are you doing here? But yeah, they were an incredible bunch, and
Yeah.
they really got a thrill out of. And I think a lot of them didn't know what to expect at all, and I'm sure a lot of them thought they would come and it would be a bit of a talking heads documentary and a bit of people sitting in rooms and stuff. So to see that all singing and dancing sort of final film, yeah, I think they were thrilled with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got a few bit of feedback stats. At Peterborough Presents, we love a little bit of data, so I thought I'd put a little data slide. So like for those of you that use culture counts, this was our first report that's showing men outnumbering women and global majority outnumbering white and white British. Which, yeah, I think is a testament of it really being an authentic representation of that neighborhood through the cast and then the friends and family they brought along with them. We had, like I say, 62% global majority, and of which 42% were Asian and British Asian. And I say this in that Asian and British Asian in particular, we're zooming in even more to British Pakistani diaspora, but at the time they were more of a target audience for us. It was a chance for loads of new people, as 46% had never attended one of our events before, and 97% strongly agreed that the film was relevant to them. And I've got some lovely quotes here. Positivity of our mix of city residents, their background stories, humour, emotion, and wonderful present. Best multicultural event, no message but positivity. Enjoyed seeing Millfield in a positive light. Great to have had my son involved in something so creative, and I appreciated the quality of the film and that the film was by the community, for the community, and inspiring. So loads of lovely comments there. There are some in our big comment bank that even swear in a positive way, but I won't repeat those. Yeah, so overall the response was incredibly phenomenal. And yeah, I'm really pleased we have some of the data to back that up. Um, so how are we doing for time? Okay, cool. So I thought now we would chat. I'd ask you both, Mark and Simon, a couple of questions, and I'll chip in as well, and then we'll open it out to a broader Q&A if anyone has anything they want to ask. So I thought I'd start with what were the biggest successes throughout the making and the launch. If you could highlight one or two things that you feel were the most successful bits, what would you say?
Do you want to jump in, Simon?
Yeah, okay, first. I think there is a thing about, if you think about the families, the communities that, the being at the Odeon, and actually seeing themselves on the Odeon screen, there's a real power in that. It's often quite an elite kind of, it's those big national movies that make it on there, isn't it? So I think it was great. I said to Thomas and Kerrier, when you get a chance to go to the cinema to see yourself on screen. I think my takeaways would be, I think just the celebration of the people and the place and the care that it was done with for the people and the community. I went to the film and it made me kind of re-look at my community and shops that I walk past every day. The fried chicken shop. I went, oh, that's beautiful. When the Asian jewelers, it was just kind of a reconnection with the community in that way. And I think the thing that I always come back to is that final shot for me, where it kind of, it pulls from the school hall with the dance group on through the doors and then into a drone shot. And it just kind of, for me, it really linked the vibrancy within the community, within the families that live in the area, and then to that wider view of our community, but all, behind all those closed doors, and actually almost giving people an insight into the lives and the people and the richness of that versus sometimes the negative views that people have or express about the area. And that final shot always gets me, not only if it's my school, but it's also, I think it does make that link between the inside and the outside, of what's seen externally and what's there in the depth of that community and communities.
Nice. I think we're all in the very serious business of happiness creation, and I don't mean that glibly at all. I think it is really a serious thing, and I think that's what we did across all levels. I think from a creative point of view for myself, from a way of giving back to that whole community that was such a big part of my upbringing, and that, yeah, that people, we added positivity, kindness, happiness, creativity, and a challenge to people all at the same time. And it worked. Yeah, that we added something good to the pot.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, I would agree with you from that kind of the artistic quality side of it. The fact that it told such a story without really saying a word, and was more people, because there was multiple narratives at the same time through some of the stories, people could get what they wanted from it. And it did push, I think, some of the and challenge some people's understanding of kind of artistic quality, or slightly more quote unquote, forgive me for using this term, but high art. The yeah, it didn't feel everybody felt cared for, but it wasn't a safe project, if you know what I mean. It really did push artistically in a really positive way. Um, yeah, some of that. And grew people's confidence and sense of pride as a result. Like you gave such a powerful little talk at the beginning of each one where you told everybody that they are artists. And like, I think that was quite a light bulb moment for some people to feel that sense of power that they've been involved in a project like this. Um, I've already mentioned about the non-creative groups, and how it was a good chance for us to showcase that. But I think that's one of the biggest successes from my point of view, is reaching those new groups, and also then the genuine relationships that we've built along the way to be able to also then give back and celebrate those people, and their stories and their places was, yeah, a real highlight for me. Um, yeah. And then what would you do differently if we did it again? And where were the difficult bits? I'll start with this one, I think.
Oink.
It's the standard thing, really, more time, like more time, more money. I would have loved to get more of the depth of engagement off-site, and we did have some early test shots where we were shooting through people's windows in their houses, but that didn't factors. But if we were to do it again, it would have been great to have some of that in there as well. There was some, I think, related to the stuff off-site. There was some miscommunication from our end around what B-roll means and shooting off-site, and the amount of film that could be, how that film could be used. And I think there was some in the minority, some members of the community that felt on balance they didn't have enough screen time. Um, but that was, I think, around our my communication and our communication around why we needed to film on set primarily for those technical reasons that Mark explained. So if we'd have done that again, more time to allow that to iron itself out. Um, yeah, I think, oh, and another thing, learning for us, because it was the first time we've dealt with music licensing and commercial music licensing in particular. So that was just some new learning for us around the cost of that and how yeah, licensing tracks works. That was something new for me. Um, yeah, Mark, what about you?
Yeah, I think time is always the thing, and not even so much budget, but obviously budget buys you more time. But I think it's more of a sense of, to do it again, you'd sort of we would do the same thing, but we would just enrich it, because you want to grow the family who are making it. So you would want to have more people assisting us, and would want to have more people shadowing us, and you would want to have people writing scenes and then performing those scenes. So everybody has a bit more time, everybody has a bit more of a runner to it, um, just to enrich what you see on screen. Yeah, I don't really have any negative any negative things to feedback at all, because it's I think everybody did such an amazing job, and it would just be a case of building on that.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I think one other thing, it does come back to more time, I think, but I'd have loved it rather than just buying in a set builder, that same thing, building. And we did have some early conversations with the prison and their woodworking department about them building it with us. But that didn't work out, unfortunately. So that did put the pressure on a little bit from my point of view to then find a set builder. And it's the most times I've been hung up on when I've called to inquire. But we found a brilliant set builder in the end. Yeah, so if finding other ways behind and off camera, people could get, like Mark says, about the growing of the people, I'd have loved to grow more behind the camera as well as in front of. Simon, was there anything from your point of view that you have thought about that could have been done differently?
Suppose it is a time thing, but I think it was really a real practicality issue as well. The fact that we need the hall. The only time it was free was during half term. The number of other people from the community who were in the building during the time of the filming would cause us a lot of safeguarding concerns if we had the children in the building. It would have been amazing if we could have had the children in while the film was going on as well, and that wouldn't be practical. But I think it was really nice. We had a class or a year group out at the museum and the art gallery yesterday in Peterborough, and the film's playing there at the moment on a loop. And I know certainly some of the children kind of didn't know the film and saw it, sat through it, and it was only that last shot when they went, "That's our hall," and it's kind of like it would be great for them to have that exposure to the process as well. It would be my only wish, but I think it was a real opportunity in a different way for the school to be involved.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'd have loved that too. When we do 2.0, we can do that. Um, yeah, I think I'll stop sharing here now for a bit so I can see everyone. Um, and have a little nosy at the chat, see if there's any um, questions or no questions so far. Does anyone have any kind of questions, comments, thoughts? Um,
Hi, Charlie. Hi, Mark. Hi, Simon. That was a really wonderful look into the project as a whole. And thank you for making the time to share this more widely. My question is for you, Charlie, around the kind of the decision-making process and the sense of ownership that the people who got involved from the beginning felt. And did you have everyone who made the decision, agreed or kind of came to the panel, made the decision, want to be in Millfield of Dreams? Or did you have anyone that was like, oh, I've made the decision, but I actually don't see myself in front of the camera, and that's okay. I'm just curious.
yeah, only one actually that wasn't physically in front of the camera on film, but he did loads of the background volunteering with the street closure and connecting us up with people, and was part of the testing when we were testing filming through the houses. We went to his house to do that. Did you sneak him in the end, Mark or Chaz, or not? I'm trying to remember with the draft shots.
I'm never going to say.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Everybody else. So there was a picture of Dr. Manick in the Miss Peterborough sash. She's Miss Asia, Great Britain. And she was on the panel. She's a local doctor, and her daughter, which we only found out really through the group signing up. Her daughter goes to the cricket club, and so she was in through the involved in that cricket scene as well. And Zara and Xander themselves didn't get involved in being filmed either, but they were again involved really behind the scenes and helping coordinate the whole partnership in the first place, and
The
then show
infrastructure.
the film at Gladstone Primary. Sorry, Mark, go on.
Yeah, no, it's called Millfield of Dreams, but it could equally have been called Local Hero as well, because it's the infrastructure. It's this web of people who go out into all the different communities again that we absolutely couldn't have made it without, because you need those people on the ground to draw everybody closer to the hub of the project.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for a place like Millfield, I don't think this project would have worked if it had been the first project we did, because there are so many connections, so many relationships that need to build. And like I say, because it's got this history of being disaffected and that sense of distrust of people coming in, I think we needed those genuine relationships to bring those people on that journey with us. Not to say it wouldn't work with a brand new thing, because I think the framework would, but I think particularly for Millfield, we needed to have that long journey of partnership with the communities first. Yeah, does that answer your question?
It does, and it has prompted a quick follow-up, if I might
Mm.
be bold. And that is, did you have any resistance when you kind of paused or stopped the Millfield Festival and transitioned into this kind of more residency model?
Good question. Not resistance, no. I think we're still kind of thinking through all the learning from it, but I think, and Sarah, feel free to chip in as well at this point if you've got anything you want to add. I think people love the festival, loved the memories it created, and some of like we had particularly Carnival. We had Carnival working with Mandinga Arts to create a local carnival for that small parade, and people loved the spectacle of it. They loved the the one day get together and how it was a neutral ground for all the communities to get together. But from our point of view, the sustainability of it and being able to either authentically work with the community so that they lead it, that was never really going to happen, I don't think. The ability, people don't have the capacity or the will or the to do the, I mean, I hate doing the event management and I'm paid to do it. So to then put it on a member of the community, like, yeah, it's not, I don't think that was going to happen. I think there are people that still would enjoy that kind of festival environment, but I think people were very understanding of our reasoning for transitioning into more of a residency model. Is there anything you add, Sarah?
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, it's always a really difficult decision to make, and we did a lot of chatting to people before we actually made that call. But there was some communities definitely came up to me and said, "Oh, this is really good because the festival, I liked it, but I didn't know how to get involved in it, or it didn't sit with my community and kind of the way that we like to engage in creativity." So it was just you'll always every single project people have you go to and take part in it because there's something you connect with, but this provided something different. So you'll always get those people who went, oh, I really like the festival. But also at the same time, we've been developing Peterborough Celebrates Festival in the city, and that became a city-wide platform for a lot of the groups that grew out of Millfield Festival. So we had dance groups that have formed part of Millfield Festival. We're now performing at Peterborough Celebrates. So it feels like a little bit like it had done a little bit of its time, do you know what I mean? And its need at that time, and we just needed to move it on. And it's just nice to try some other things. The other thing I would say about Millfield of Dreams, what I liked about it is that it allowed everyone to bring something that they were able to give. So whether that was, I know how to play cricket, I can come and play cricket on site, or I can give furniture this, or I can give our school hall. And it was nice to see people coming back to the school and kind of go, I used to go to school here, now I'm actually filming in here. So it was a nice offer. It was able to kind of meet people where they were at and fit with their needs and what they had to offer.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Any more questions from anybody? Oh, amazing. I'll read Hannah's comment out loud. So this model really demonstrates an effective approach in gentle trust building and providing accessible opportunities for creatives and communities meaningfully influence the way projects land and feel genuinely part of it. Feels like there's lots more potential for the recognition and amplification of cultural or faith-rooted creative practices. This model feels like a helpful way to do that while protecting authenticity. Thank you, Hannah. Yeah, 100% agree. Like it, yeah, the framework and the framing, and I think also to a certain extent the art form allowed that in a really yeah, like you say, authentic way. And I'm really proud. My proudest bit is looking at that cast list and looking at the names of all of those people, and really proud that we were able to include absolutely everybody that wanted to get involved. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, I will ask you a question, Mark. What's next for this framework and this process for you, do you think?
Yeah, so we very much feel like we've stumbled, luckily, on a format that is highly repeatable, but always unique, because it depends completely on who's in it. So we've started to develop the next sort of generation of the idea, which is, again, you take a 16:9 frame, but this could be a hotel room, or it could be a time machine, or it could be a living room, or it could be a film factory where one is like making a thriller, another's making a horror film, another's making a love story. Same thing, where you patch all these things together But there's a role for everybody. There's an entry point for anybody that wants to be involved in it, and there's nothing that doesn't work once they're there. So that's the foundation for it. But we'd really like to develop this, and there's like there's almost like a supercut in my mind where we create 3 or 4 more of these that we edit together. So you've got Peterborough with Sunderland and with Weybridge and with Glasgow, or wherever. So we end up with this way of connecting all of these communities, which I think would be a sort of state of the nation piece of work. So that's something we very much have to offer and would like to develop. So if there is anybody out there that would be interested in discussing this further, then we're very much up for that conversation. Yeah, because it's a beautiful format that works across the board, and we've really nailed down the essential elements of it, and it can only grow and become something greater from there. So yeah, if you are interested, in all seriousness, then get in touch. We have a pack. We can send you a pack. We can always talk. Yeah.
I was just thinking you should pitch it directly to Arts Council or like the Creative People and Places team that oversee that, because maybe they would. Because like you say, there is something I would love that on a personal level. I think of the ability to tell the story of the importance of all of the CPPs as much as
Yeah, and all of these incredible places that don't get the limelight. It's such a fantastic framework to present the very best of them. So yeah, we are super keen to do more of it, because it's such a gorgeous little format. Yeah.
We've had a question from George around, was there anything you learned or weren't expecting from this project that you will take forward when you facilitate Peterborough-based programs in the future? There definitely is. Let me have a think. I think I mean, first and foremost, and we've talked about this a lot already, but it solidifies the importance of having residents and people that you want to work with around the table right at the beginning to make those decisions, because they picked right, they picked good, and as a team, they were then really good at, like I say, signposting. This project wouldn't have happened without them, not just to pick the artist, but then to support the practicalities of making it. That's not necessarily new learning for us, but I think this one really solidified that, even down to suggesting places to where we should film when we were doing the out and about the roving footage. We've got a full list of places that mean stuff to the community, all the way through to bringing people in, yeah, and being the stars themselves. Is there anything from your point of view, Mark?
I don't think I have anything to add to that particular question, no.
Yeah, I'm trying to. There definitely is more. I'm just struggling to think about things we haven't maybe already spoke about. I think the practicalities actually of how we framed the filming week itself for this kind of project, I would definitely do again. So I basically made a big schedule of hour slots, and then we fitted everybody in. And the communication between the whole team actually, and having that briefing and talking through the week. But then there was also some people coming on board once we'd started filming. So having, I think, a clear schedule and structure as a producer, this project needed more paperwork than others in that way in order to be a fluid process. And then the communications between the team as to who was physically there on what day. That was definitely something I would take forward, particularly for more kind of complex or mass participation projects, having that good solid paperwork foundation. It's quite a boring answer, but it definitely helped.
I think for me, there's just something also about kind of how obviously the community chose the project, and the community they know their community the best. The residents in the community will know their community best as to know what people might go for. I think there was that thing of sometimes people were turning up to set and they're a bit like, oh, don't know quite what I'm turning up to. And that can be seen as like, oh, you need to brief them more. But actually that surprise element meant that weren't able to build up any anxiety about performing or anything like that. So they were just dropped into it, and Mark was able to do his thing and kind of get them involved and make the most of it. And I think sometimes that surprise element allowed more to come out, and people did things that they might not have felt comfortable with if they'd have been given a full briefing, if that makes sense. So yeah, that was interesting for me.
Definitely. Yeah, I would agree with that. And that's something I think we can take forward around the surprise nature of some of and not giving too much information. Yeah, exactly. Not allowing too much time to overthink it, particularly in relation to performance and being a person that is themselves part of the project. Um, cool. Um, any final questions, comments, observations? We can finish a few minutes early if not. Nah, amazing. Awesome.
I think we need Alex to give us a wave from the background.
He's got headphones on. Mr.
Director.
Palmer? No, too busy. Next job.
And actually, I think that's when you mentioned it earlier around the kind of the technical skills, but like the technical knowledge and expertise and care that you as a team brought made everything like, yeah, I had so much trust in you all in the things that I had no experience of project managing before around like the live in-person shots and using the drone and the health and safety stuff around that. Yeah, that was a real joy to, yeah, again, learn from you about that process so that if we were to do another film project, we've got some of those skills and expertise and understanding
Yeah,
now.
and it's a really important point that I think about demystifying these things, because you think, oh, we're making a film, and people go, oh God, it's a film, and then people start behaving like they're filmmakers, and that's the last thing you want is people behaving like filmmakers. You're making a piece of work with some people, and to demystify it and have get it there safely on time and roughly on budget. Is that those are the essentials, but showing people it's pretty simple if you're both prepared, have a sense of humor, and have steel in your veins at the same time. It takes a lot of courage to just go, this is what we do, and let's see if it works. Yeah, but I would like to think that people walked away from it going, oh, it's actually quite simple, this filmmaking business, isn't it? You point a camera at something, people do stuff, you say thank you, that's brilliant, let's try it again 15 times, and then you go and edit it. I'm a great fan of demystifying those processes, because that allows people to enter the process themselves and think, I could do that. That's how I was as a kid. Doors were opened to me, to give me opportunity, and I think as artists, you're responsible for doing that for the next in line. So yeah, and it is pretty sexy as well at the same time. You're making a film. You've got a drone that's like this big in a street in downtown Millfield, and the police are stopping the traffic and stuff. It's kind it's good fun, but it's just people making work at the end of the day. Very good work, but.
Absolutely. Cool. All right, let's wrap up there then. Yeah, thank you, Mark. Simon's had to go off for head teacher duties, but thank you to Simon as well. Thank
Pleasure.
you all for listening in. If you're listening, thinking you want to do your own version of Millfield of Dreams, drop me an email. I'll link you up with Mark. And yeah, like I say, also if you're interested in the broader case study that we'll be launching around Millfield stuff, again, drop me an email. You should all have my contact. And then I'll send all that through with you.